Winchell. I'm the chair of the Denver chapter of the Metro Denver, Colorado Renewable Energy Society. Here's our featured guest this evening. Paul Williamson will be speaking to us about
hydrogen transportation.
And our mission is to have a carbon neutral Colorado powered by 100% renewable energy, to transition Colorado to a new energy economy that is 100% renewable for education, engagement, and creating networking opportunities across all Denver communities. And that's one of the features we're trying to offer to our members, is an opportunity to meet not only online, but also in person, where we can make connections, build community, network, allow people an opportunity to find jobs. If they're looking for jobs, employers to find employees, entrepreneurs to meet, exchange ideas, create a little synergy, and so on, to hopefully create to move us toward a new energy economy, which at this point, Zoom technology is not quite up to the task. So we encourage you all to come join us in person. We value renewables, emerging technologies, efficiency, diversity, inclusion, and community. CRES is a statewide organization, is nonpartisan, nonprofit, 501c3 membership organization. I'd like to take a moment to pay attention and recognize some of the sponsors that make our organization possible. These are the gigawatt and megawatt members who contribute and provide us with some of the resources that we need to accomplish what we do here. We see Moss Adams, Vista Engineering Group, Sinton Instruments, Solaris Energy, to name some of them. Helio Electrify Your Life, COSA, an organization that also supports, I believe it's private installers and so on, to support our transition to a new energy economy. ARS Solar and Renewable, BrightSense, Colorado Green Building Guild, and so on, Sandbox Solar. So we should all show some appreciation if we ever hear about them and thank them. Upcoming events the CRES is offering. On Thursday, April 25th at 7 p.m., there will be a hybrid event at MDCRES in Jefferson County. The title is How to Electrify Your Home and Why You'd Want to Do It. The speaker will be Eric Wilson from NREL. Following that, or before that, actually, a couple days before that, on April 23rd at 7 p.m., Fort Collins, the Northern Colorado Renewable Energy Society, will have an in-person meeting at the New Belgium Brewing in Fort Collins. The title of the presentation on that evening will be Industrial Scale Decarbonization, High Temperature Heat Pump Steam Production. Speaker is Ashwin Salvi from Atmos Zero. If you'd like more events or like to sign up for our newsletter, here's the information for that at the bottom there. Without further ado, let's go on to the event you are here for. Let's hear from our guest today, Paul Williamson from SDE Holdings, who will speak to us about hydrogen-powered transportation.
Well, thank you very much for having me here, and I appreciate my crew here that's been helping me get through all the technical things. I've been involved in hydrogen development for about 20 years. I drank the Kool-Aid back in 2002 when I went up to Montreal for the International Hydrogen Conference. So that's when I first learned about hydrogen and decided that that was the way that we wanted to go. We wanted to have a sustainable and infinite supply of energy instead of the direction that we're on. So as we get going here, I've got a lot of stuff. We have come up with, we think, is some real solutions for transportation and especially for Colorado. And let me get into this a little bit. The first thing we looked at are what the challenges are in Colorado. Over at it, and the reason I got that picture there, that happens on the far right there. That's my dad with his service station in the 1930s back in D. Smith, South Dakota, where I grew up. And he was on the cutting edge of transportation of those days because people needed all the services that the car has to offer and need, and he was willing to move that forward. But the challenges that we have here in Colorado, first of all, there is a real disconnect, I feel, as far as people understanding supply and demand. Anybody that's taken Economics 101, which I did not excel in a lot, but I did understand supply and demand. And Father Guido Sarducci, do any of you remember him on Saturday Night Live?
Yep.
So Father Guido Sarducci said, you go to get a college degree, yeah, and you have to know things about supply and demand, okay? So we're going to teach economics. You know supply, demand. Okay, you passed economics. And he says, we have to learn a foreign language. ¿Cómo está usted? Muy bien, gracias. Okay, you have your Spanish degree now. And you save all that money and all that time, and we've already given it to you. Well, supply and demand is basic, and that's where we're really hurting as far as sustainable energy goes, because we have leaders in this country and in this state especially that don't understand supply and demand. They are presently trying to put in hydrogen hubs. There's one here, one over there, one here. And that's not the way my dad set up his service station. This is a second service station. They had a series of those, and they had a demand with the car that needed it. So you have to have both of them come together. And the way that we're approaching supply and demand with sustainables here in the United States is really behind the times and is still operating in the 1800s. So that thinking and some of the funding whims that we get, and the federal government is known for this through the national labs and through the legislatures. There's a whim here, they want to do this, that, but there's no connectivity there. And they all go out and they say, well, I am great. I brought in these 3 hydrogen refueling stations, and I am such a great person. I call this strategic hyperbole. It gets votes, but it doesn't do anything for our future as far as putting together the future of our sustainable technology. Archaic combustion and finite petroleum resources. When I wrote my book, Winning the Energy Wars, I designated 2 things that we need to look at: finite energy and infinite energy. And we have to get to infinite energy, and that's what hydrogen is. We'll have that forever. It's the #1 element in the universe. And for us to be using that to burn and pollute the atmosphere is just complete nonsense. So we need to move forward, get away from the greenhouse pollution and business and industries put up into our ozone. We need to do something about the devolving transportation infrastructure. Our transportation infrastructure is not keeping up with what is needed, and we're not going to make any progress. In fact, it's devolving. Colorado is squandering our renewable resources. We have everybody in Colorado, if you hear more than 10 minutes, you know that Colorado has 300 days of sunshine. Whether that's really true or not, Chamber of Commerce says it is, so that's fine. But we're still classified as a black coal state. And here we got all this sunshine and we got all this power just bouncing off of everywhere, and we're not using it. So we're squandering something that could really make a difference. And then finally here, Colorado's insane Excel power tax and spend monopoly and control of the grid. That is our #1 problem, really, is what Excel Energy is doing. They do a lot of strategic hyperbole. They put up a solar panel here, but they do tax and spend just like our legislature does. And they put in a solar, like down in Pueblo, they put a big solar park down there. Guess who paid for that? All the taxpayers that are on the Excel grid system. So it's no different than what the legislature does to us. So, okay, now let me do this again. So let me play this short video. It's 3 minutes that we put together to give you a sort of overview of what we're trying to do.
It's the 21st century, and technology propels our progress faster than ever. Though we may be able to do so much more, we seem to move slower and slower. Traffic is getting worse. Our state's infrastructure is overloaded. A growing population means an increased number of vehicles on the road and swelling congestion. It's becoming harder to move around quickly and efficiently. To continue our growth, we must leave 20th century ideas in the 20th century. We must apply modern thinking to our transportation to create a brighter future. The Sustainable Transportation System by Sustainable Transportation and Energy Holdings Incorporated will transform how we live, work, and travel. It will unclog our highways and revolutionize how we get around. STE's Sustainable Transportation System is the only fiscally viable, non-tax, near-term, technologically advanced, sustainable transportation solution available. This system will offer a smooth, stress-free alternative to our congested roadways. With STE's multi-station and express service accessibility, the service meets a rider's needs on their schedule. The multifaceted community opportunity stations are designed for convenience, with easy boarding, virus control, shops, sustainable villages, and much more available to riders. STE's revolutionary hydrogen battery electric technology moves your coach quickly, quietly, and efficiently to your destination. You can relax or quietly work while riding on the revolutionary continuous guideway system. 70-mile-per-hour non-stop express service delivers you quickly to your destination. A typical congested 90-minute commute can be reduced to just 30 minutes, leaving you more time for what you love. STE's low-cost operational and maintenance configuration make its tax-free financial deployment a welcome addition to any community. Its cost is 4 times cheaper than traditional light rail, 8 times cheaper than a commuter rail, 30 times cheaper than Amtrak, and 140 times cheaper than the cost of a car and parking. With its speed, low cost, high efficiency, and capacity, STE will take cars off our roadways, significantly reducing congestion and pollution. Establishing this new transformative transportation network will usher in new opportunities such as new broadband, first and last mile initiatives, business expansion, and community growth. It's the 21st century. It's time to modernize our transportation and reconnect our cities and towns. STE Holdings Incorporated is poised to leave our outdated 180-year-old transportation in the rearview mirror and bring a new vision of the future forward.
So we're dealing with why we want to do this. And the bottom line is we're dealing with non-solution based status quo. Have you ever seen a road in Colorado that they built and then the next week it's full? Those are just status quo thinking that if we build more roads, things are going to get better. So we have a lot of things that I want to get across here, but I'll just touch on it briefly. We're dependent on finite carbon fuels. We have choking congestion. Greenhouse gas production is continually getting better or worse, I'm sorry. Global warming dominates our environment. Our quality of life is diminishing. Leadership vision and understanding is way behind the 8 ball. Lacking infinite energy planning, valuable petroleum combustion. We're burning one of the most valuable resources we have on our planet. This whole room would not exist without petroleum and everything that we're using to make petroleum, yet we're burning it and putting it up into the atmosphere. Inadequate grid infrastructure. This is one of the biggest things. We can't really expand our use of sustainable energy in Colorado because Xcel has control of all the grid infrastructure. And no matter what energy company you have, Xcel controls it because they control all of the grid. And if you don't expand the grid, you won't get anywhere. And to expand the grid, where's Xcel going to get the money? From individual taxpayers and users. So that's one of the biggest hangups. Scarcity of finite lithium battery resources. Our president thinks that we should have more electric cars. That won't work. We only have, if we went even close to what we want to do with electric cars, we only have about 10% of the lithium needed to make that happen. So our whole energy security situation is a mess. Environmental degradation, pollution, air non-solutions, profit-centered monopoly energy suppliers, coal-focused energy, and antiquated business models all stand in our way as far as energy is concerned. In transportation, non-solution there is we still are on a 1800s mass transit thinking paradigm. We have failing infrastructure. A building is way out of congestion, trying to build our way out. Expanding population, people will love to come to Colorado. Trouble is, most of them are staying. And the more that stay, the more sprawl we have, the more congestion that we have. Failure of tax and spend, increasing deaths and injuries. I can't remember what the most recent, but I think we're ahead of deaths and injuries right now for the whole year. And every death and injury has an unbelievable effect on your infrastructure and your people and what they can get through with their families. Lacking leadership vision, federal funding money grabs. Every time the government comes up with something, everybody grabs for that money. But the trouble is, to build a hydrogen refueling station now, because it's federally funded, it's over $1 million to fund one station. Whereas when you put it into a system, they become about 1/10 of that. So we need to change that. Productive decline because of so much time wasted on our highways. Affordable housing and urban sprawl. We need affordable housing because people have to have a place to live, but they need connectivity to get to their jobs. Operational and maintenance shortfalls, we see those every day. Solution-based problem solving. And I've got this picture here. This is a picture of me. I'm in the far right hand, sitting on the right hand side of our lemonade stand. And this is when I was about 10 years old. My next door neighbor was Steve. He's the one that's squinting down in the left hand side. And we didn't have a swimming pool in D. Smith, South Dakota, population 1,300. So I didn't think that was right at being 10 years old, but we needed to come up with a solution for it. So I talked Steve into it. We made our lemonade stand, and this is my sister and his sister that are our stand-ins. And so we raised $7.75. I gave $7.75 to my dad. I said, here, put this into the swimming pool fund because we've got to get a swimming pool here in D. Smith. He took it to the bank. The bank didn't have such a fund. So he come back and he says, I'm sorry, Rick, we can't do that. I said, you've got to do that. We got to set up a fund. He went back to the bank. They set up a fund. 20 years or 15 years later, I get an invite. I'm a freshman in college, and guess what they had? They had the inauguration of the D. Smith Public Swimming Pool in D. Smith, South Dakota. Now, there's a lot of people that got involved in between there. They sold lots of hot dogs and new ways, we call them in South Dakota, at fairs and all that. But they finally raised it. But it all started with one solution. And that's where we are with our whole transportation. We need to come up with a solution that we can make happen. Opportunity knocks only once at a closed door. And we see lots of closed doors as we're trying to do innovation here with our project. So we've based our whole project on what we call the STE, Sustainable Transportation and Energy, Sustainable Synergy, Solution-Based Hybrid Hydrail Business Model. In other words, sustainable synergy. And the way it works is everything has to work together. So let's start on the left-hand side here. It starts with innovation. We think we have some innovative ideas. There's lots of innovative technology out there that's just off the shelf. We're not inventing stuff, but there's things out there we can grab hold of. It needs to be sustainable financially. There is not one program that NRail or any of the rest of them have put together that is sustainable, that will fund itself. There's nothing that the legislature does that they put together that's sustainable that will fund itself. It all comes out of our pockets as taxpayers. Sustainable economic development, if you set it up right, one thing begets another, begets another, begets another, we can have a sustainable transportation system here in Colorado. Community, and I've broken this up sometime, I put COM, M, and then unity. A new transportation system that is sustainable will glue our communities together. And we want to look at the environment. Our system is completely 100% pollution free. You can't say that for any other transportation system in the world right now. So the energy comes in, our sustainable energy comes into our sustainable synergy model, and transportation comes out. And as you saw in the movie, we can do it cheaper than anyone else can just by having a good model to follow. So let's look at innovations to start with, and I'll go through these as quickly as I can. Is non-tax, non-fee, and low fares. So we're not going to collect any taxes from anybody. The amount of taxes they want to collect for new transportation system here in Colorado are out of this world. And we're talking trillions of dollars and 10 decades of time. It's near term. We can get going and we can start moving forward with less than five years. It's underwritten and powered by renewable energy. And I'll get into that a little bit more a little later. 100% net zero plus. We'll be making more energy and power than what we will use. That means we will have energy to sell to communities along the way that's renewable. Hydrogen-powered hydro coaches. We have talked to companies in Japan and in Germany, because nobody in the United States has put anything together because we're so far behind you in the United States right now. But there are off-the-shelf hydrogen coaches that we can use and put into operation. We've invented the smooth ride concrete rail beds, which are easy to put down, smoother to ride on, and can be all made locally. And we've already got a contractor to do that for us. We have STE's solar canopy. If you can envision a solar canopy over a rail system, the solar canopy goes the whole length of the right-of-way, 50 feet wide, and solar panels the whole way. We can have an excess of 10 terawatts of electricity that we can sell and underwrite the project that we're doing by having just the solar canopy, not even talking about the solar farms that we're putting together. Okay, enhanced bike ped conservation greenway. We'll have that follow the right-of-way throughout the whole system. I'm a biker myself, so that's how we got that in there. Security corridors. We can have high security and visualize, and we can watch everything that's going on. Have a broadband backbone that we can spin off and make every community in Colorado accessible to the broadband. Community opportunity stations, and there's a picture in that in our film, but I will also look at that a little bit more. But the opportunity stations are just that. They open up all sorts of opportunities. And one idea, I don't know, have you ever been to Epcot Center in Florida? And Epcot has different venues for seeing different countries. That's what we want to do. We want to name each one of our stations a country. We'll have Japan, and we'll have Paris, and we'll have or France, and we'll have Spain. So you could be on the train and travel the whole world just by being on our rail. And we can feature those products from those particular countries. I'm not a great wine drinker, but I know enough people that would enjoy a weekend going from country to country to country just to find out what wines they have, and then the clothing and all that. So I think it opens new economic development nobody has. I wanted to call it Epcot Center West, but then copyright kind of got in the way there. But we'll come up with something along that line. Low cost EV charging and H2 refueling. We'll have level 3 EV charging, and you can park your car there and have it charged while you're going to work. And we'll have also, of course, hydrogen refueling at every station. So we'll have an EV charging station and an H2 refueling station every 2 miles at each one of our community opportunity centers. H2 pipeline and battery storage. Behind you here in the room, and what you can see, I think, in the background, is the two things that make this up. We need H2O, which we can separate out and have hydrogen on one side, and we can have oxygen on the other. And we have 3 ways of making this and storing it. The sun, of course, is one of the main sources of power where we can split this. And I've got the people in the room here, the people that were good enough to come out in person to see this presentation, get to see this, not you at home, but the people that ventured out. And so this is a model, and this is how simple it is to make hydrogen. You have a source of water. You split the water here in the electrolyzer. The electrolyzer separates out the oxygen and hydrogen, and then it feeds it through a fuel cell and creates electricity. and then the electricity is fed into the system, and then the water recirculates, and we start that all over again. And that's why it's a sustainable process. It is so simple that it just is crazy that we're not doing it. The reason we're not doing it is because we're doing it through government funding and taxing everybody else, trying to keep an old system going that still goes back to the Roman times. Here, we can talk about the future, and we can save water resources, we can save pollution, all the other things that go along with a hydrogen future that we're putting together here. All right. So, sustainable financials. This is something that just boggles people's minds because they've never thought of this before. Now, one of the reasons is my partner, Dave Rubel, and I are both 76 years old. Are we going to be alive? Although one of my goals in 7th grade was to live to be 120. So I might see more of this than people anticipate. If I'm not, we want to set up a system that will work. We're not going to make a bunch of money off from it. We want a system that feeds on itself and supports itself sustainably. So it works very easily here. You have a solar farm generation or linear solar ribbon generation, as I said, with our canopy. So that generates power from the sun. That power goes into renewable energy grid sales. So we're selling renewable energy at a quarter of the cost that Xcel Energy is along our right-of-way. And then that money has a revenue generation, and we take that money and we send it back into the STE system operations and the STE system development. So the more energy we make, the more money comes into the system and the more it keeps going. And then we take that and the hydrogen that's generated from and the energy storage that we have our hydrogen stored in, it's just a simple system. This is far from rocket science, and it's far from any economics that I ever learned because people just don't think that way. Okay, so let's see where we're going next here. Sustainable economic development. I don't have to reiterate, you guys all know what these are. Got energy security because we don't have to depend on foreign countries, job creation and access, tourism and business magnet, getting people up into the mountains in any, the best time to get people in the mountains is when it's snowing like hell. And that's the time when we can take as many people up there and go skiing as they want and get home safely. And it doesn't take 2 or 3 hours on I-70 to get up there and get back. Sustainable, affordable, low-income housing. Every one of our sustainable villages will have sustainable housing. And I built a sustainable home, as I was talking before, over in Superior. That was my display and demonstration home until the Marshall Fire came by. And it took away that home and that demonstration. But I built it, I know how to build it, and it works with very little energy demands. EV charging and H2 refueling, we hit that already, efficient. And there's some reiteration in all these. You can see how they all fit together. One begets the other in our sustainable synergy model. Efficient private partnerships. NASA, guess where they're getting all their development from now? It's not through NASA itself. It's all the Elon Musks, it's Tesla. These guys are the ones that are building the spaceships of the future. We need to bring that back to transportation. Community opportunity station, hydrogen development centers, solar panel manufacturing, recycling and repurposing. We want to bring that to the States so that we can do it efficiently and have it here. Coach manufacturing, we can do that. Of course, that's lots more jobs. And we can make, we got all kinds of hydrogen. There's no reason why we can't make ammonia that can be used in agriculture that can give us better productivity. I grew up in a farming community, can you tell? The community, here's my Unity little thing. Net Zero Plus, I've explained that already. We'll have battery islands at each community opportunity station, so we have battery backup when sun's not shining. Carbon sequestration. We've got how many wells in North Front Range, the old oil wells? We can sequester all of this carbon down into those wells. Once carbon is at, I don't know what it is, 250, 350 feet, it liquefies and it stays there. So we can do that just as part of our process. Child care centers. How would it be if you lived in East Resume Speed, Colorado, and you drove to the community opportunity station to get on the train to go to work, and you could drop your kids off at a child care center at the community opportunity station and then pick them up on the way home? It's just so logical. I've talked to some people in Washington about that, and they think that's the best thing since sliced bread. They've never heard of anything like that. Robotic shuttles, first and last mile. We've already worked with a company called, of course I'd forget it. I got it on later in here. Anyway, collaboration centers, places where the community can gather, where entrepreneurs can talk, where religious groups can meet, whatever they want to do. Virus health control measures, small business venues for my Paris center or whatever it's going to be. Technology, college, university hubs, vertical organic farming. We need that in our community opportunity stations to generate more oxygen, to have a healthier atmosphere, and to make new ways to underwrite agriculture in the future. H2 production and refueling, and senior and disabled services. Now, this is a pretty small picture here of our community opportunity station that was also featured in our film. This is a grant that I got from the US Department of Energy, and put this together. So these are all run by sustainable energy. We have the plans. This has already been put together. All we need to do is have a place to put it. Okay, and then environment. If we're not making any pollution, that's a pretty good first step, I think. So it's a net zero operation. Positive climate input, reduce ozone and greenhouse gases, provide energy security, non-carbon services, 21st century technology instead of the things that we're trying to deal with now. The overhead guideway system or a power system that RTD uses, for example, costs $11 million a mile just by putting that extension cord up there and doing it. Our system using hydrogen is $4 million a mile. So tell me which one is going to be more economical and more sustainable. Integrated bike ped conservation greenways, vertical agriculture and waste management and recycling. And timeline. Everybody wants to know, when can we get this done? And as soon as we can, I guess. The first thing we want to do is we've been looking at the pre-project logistics since about 2016. And so we made a lot of good inroads there and made a lot of progress. We need to get grid access for renewable energy sales. We need to get rid of monopoly thinking as far as energy is concerned in Colorado if we're going to make any progress. Acquire agreements for solar R&D site and right-of-ways. We're working on that. Phase 1 construction solar farms. We're working on some individual businesses that want to have renewable energy, and we can use that as a way to generate funds. And we want to put together our POC, proof of concept R&D park. We're looking for a site in the Front Range to do that right now. We need about 160 acres. So we can show how the technology works and how we can implement that here in Colorado. When I was growing up in South Dakota, my dad was a car dealer. He went from service stations to car dealers. I used to run the service station for him in the summer. And so he says, I'm going to give you some cars to sell down there. So I was down on the highway. I had a little land next to the service station. So he used to give me some of his old cars that got traded in, and I got to sell those cars. What's the first thing that people did? They come to my place because it was visible. They came and they kicked the tires. They looked at what was going on. Can this car be used for a school car? Because I had a lot of farm kids driving into town for school. So people want to kick the tires. We want to see how it works. And that's just the same model that I used when I was a teenager. We want to connect with the Port of Colorado and DIA. We haven't got a timeline on that yet. And the North Front Range Phase 2 projects going from Denver up to Fort Collins to start with. Then we want to connect with Wyoming, and we also want to connect with the southern and go down to Albuquerque. Because since we're a private business, we can do that. State business couldn't do that. They wouldn't be able to cross those state lines. Mountain phase Anybody I talk to in the mountains, if you could find a better, faster way that they can get more people up there, they're in favor of it. And we could do that. In fact, you know, if housing becomes a no-brainer, the people that work there where they can't find a place to live, they need to come up and they need to live there or somewhere else and come on up on the train when their job starts. And then begin a system service for the whole state of Colorado is where we really want to get. Here's what our plan looks like, and this is an idea of where the right-of-ways would be. You can see that it stretches across the whole state and makes everything possible. Benefits: no financial obligation by the state, no tax and spend, national transportation energy prominence for the state of Colorado, high-speed DIA connection to Wyoming and New Mexico, technological R&D campus with our proof of concept idea, utility scale renewable energy will be available, and we can sell the 10 terawatts I was talking about. Extensive economic development, the jobs, thousands of jobs. They went over and opened up a new site over in Golden for some technology company. I think they're hiring 20 people. We're at least 100 times that. And that was some of the strategic hyperbole that I'm talking about. Transitioning from finite to infinite energy resource dependency, national hydrogen leadership site, and probably some others. Come on in. So we've looked at some partners already in trying to put this together. We've identified some real estate people we're working with and private partnerships. We have financial partners in the bonding and equity sales. We've got a company that will get all the funding for our solar farms and also help us at the installation of all the solar panels that we're going to be installing. So our solar canopy system, that is a new invention. Nobody's ever used that before that we know of. Maybe they have, but we want to put that in our proof of concept part. Hydrogen engineering, procurement, and construction partners, we've already got that. One of the leading hydrogen people used to live in Lakewood, and he's moved up to Cheyenne now because of the poor business environment here in Colorado for renewable energy. But we are still working with him, and he's gone all over the world putting in hydrogen stations and all the stuff I've talked about as far as hydrogen. He and I put together a hydrogen refueling station at the University of Montana and put that in operation. Then the DXM used to be TTCI down in Pueblo. They are willing to work with us on the testing, and we'll have to get the new hydrogen coaches certified for the United States. Robo Easy Ride, there's the company we were talking about as far as having a robo that will connect with all of our stations, so you don't have to worry about driving a car there. Congressional High-Speed Rail Caucus. We have been contacted by a congressional representative from Connecticut. He wants to put our system down the median of all the interstate highways in the United States, which would be cheaper than anything that the US Congress could ever come up with, and not to speak of NREL or any of them. Future partners, ammonia, steel panel production, etc., Alstom, hydrail vehicle manufacturing. Okay. So I'm not going to go through each one of these. This is the 10-phase plan that we've put together to cover the state of Colorado. And again, it's all self-supporting. Pathway to sustainable transportation. One begets the other. First, you have out-of-the-box thinking. Then you have new sustainable paradigm that you implement. You have sustainable fiscal resource creation, sustainable alternatives that make things happen, renewable energy technologies, renewable energy distribution, grid distribution access, power purchase agreements, and you have a sustainable transportation energy system. So I thank you for your time. This is my partner, Dave Rubel, is on the left there. I'm on the right and what we've done and put together. And one more slide here that I threw in. If you remember my Kool-Aid stand. Okay, so we were successful in raising the money for the swimming pool. Well, there wasn't any place in town to put it. You would think there would be a lot, but they decided to put it on the edge of town so that it would be easily accessible. Well, there was a big field right next to it, and there was some trailer houses and things like that. It wasn't the best neighborhood. What happened was that big field turned into a golf course because of the swimming pool. The trailer court turned into condominiums, and the whole area got formed by $7.75. And that's what we can do with new technology and new thinking. Thank you. I appreciate your time and your attention. And if there are any questions, I'll be glad to address them the best I can.
I have a comment.
Okay, yeah, good.
So this is very, very encouraging. Hydrogen is obviously pollution-free fuel because you make water. And if I understand, and hydrogen has been the holy grail, I guess, for decades, right? So if I understand this right, your proposal in terms of the heart of the process is to take solar energy, use that to for solar farm generating electricity, use the electricity to split the water, then you make hydrogen, and that hydrogen goes to a fuel cell.
Right.
So I'm just imagining a process flow diagram here, the so-called PFD.
You can see the mess my brain is all the time.
But I'm curious about the overall energy balance on that PFD, as well as economics and carbon balance. That's really the heart of this process.
Yeah.
You had a lot of comments about public transportation and a lot of things that are not really specific to hydrogen. You could use those for any type of renewable energy. So I'm just curious to see what the overall energy balance, economics, and carbon footprint, because you also mentioned sequestration of carbon. So there's carbon probably involved in this process.
Yeah, it's minimum.
You also mentioned batteries, the fuel cell itself, the manufacturing of that, also taking that into account in terms of the carbon footprint of the manufacturing.
For sure.
Process, so.
Yeah, and those ancillary things are the things that really pull it down, and that's why we want to put in carbon sequestration. And it needs to be a gradual process. There's no way, or when I was up in Montana, I used to go all over the state talking about the hydrogen future of Montana. And in 45 minutes, I don't care whether you're a rancher, a farmer, or a businessman in Montana, I could convince you that we need to get to a hydrogen economy. And they would get all excited by the end of my talk, and they'd say, let's do it. Well, unfortunately, you can't go to the wall and make a switch like that. So the carbon sequestration comes into play, especially to start with when you're using natural gas to make hydrogen. Because right now that's cheaper because of the unbelievable amount of money we're throwing into electrolyzing water. But if we can harvest the sun cheaply, we can use it on site cheaply, and we can make hydrogen cheaply. Instead of right now, hydrogen is around $3.50, $4 a kilogram, which is equivalent basically to a gallon of gasoline. So, but we can cut that in half by the process that we're talking about.
Hydrolysis.
Yeah.
I mean, electrolysis.
Yeah. So by putting the whole system together and having the system, all these comprehensive things working together, we can make it cheaper. We met with Excel early on. In fact, I knew a hydrogen guy over at Excel. He's retired now. But when we told them what we wanted to do, we wanted to collect energy and we wanted to put that on the grid, blah, 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 all the things I've told you about. Well, they said, well, that's not the way to do it. You guys can go ahead and collect the energy. We'll buy it from you for 3 cents, and then we'll sell it back to you for 20 cents. Now, again, I'm not a business guru, but selling it for 3 cents and buying it back for 20 cents ain't gonna work. And that's what the towns and all these people are finding out, that they can't afford to be with a monopoly because they control everything. So we got to do things like that that are more economical, that are more financially logical to move forward. And those ancillary things that you're talking about are for sure real. But if we can minimize all the things that we can control to start with, as we're doing this, and that's what I talked about in my book, by the year 2100, then we will be on our way. But if we don't do something even quicker than that, we're going to be in deep stuff here as far as pollution and everything else. So I want to get started. If we could take 10% of the traffic off the roads right now, that would make a huge difference in what goes on. And then eventually we can even get more.
That applies to public transportation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
My question maybe not is maybe a subset of the question you were asking, perhaps. I don't know. I guess I wondered. I mean, I understand where you can get the abundant energy from. You're going to create, I think you call them solar ribbons, which will be built over the rail.
Mm-hmm.
And using that, I'll call it this ribbon real estate over the track generates. It's a large surface that will generate electricity. You got solar panels overhead. I might be missing something, but I wasn't sure. I've not been sure why we need to put hydrogen fuel cells in there, hydrogen development in or extraction in the process. Why not just build solar batteries, store the electricity, use it for powering the trains, then you can sell back the excess to the communities, and at least that as a starting place. Maybe later, if you, depending on how much electricity you get out of it, you can start the hydrolysis process. But why that middle step of the hydrogen fuel cells? I guess I want
because hydrogen. Well, one thing is we can't get enough batteries. Batteries is a non-starter. We can't run our country on batteries. There's just no way that's going to happen. Secondly, batteries are heavy, heavy, heavy. And the correlation between weight and economy, speed, and everything else, batteries works against every one of those things. Hydrogen basically doesn't weigh anything. It is a gas. And so by storing that in tanks, we can have that go with the train. We don't have to stop and change batteries to recharge them or whatever. And we don't have to depend on foreign countries to make the batteries, which we're doing right now. We have very little battery production here in the United States. So there are just so many more reasons to go the hydrogen route than to depend on batteries. Batteries just will not make it.
Could you have just physical storage batteries somewhere on the ground, and then you would have to require more infrastructure? You could put some sort of some of these cities have these not cable cars, but they build wires overhead, and
yeah, that's what RTD uses.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Yeah, electric.
Yeah.
Light rail.
And if you're willing to pay twice as much for your infrastructure, which that costs, then that's one way to go.
Okay.
You can think of hydrogen as a battery.
Right.
It's like a way to store energy, just like a battery
Fuel
is.
cell. Hydrogen fuel cell.
Yeah.
The fuel cell is only the transponder in between hydrogen and electricity.
Right.
I see.
And it seems like the implications of like, I think you said this earlier, but just battery powered cars, like eventually we're gonna get to a point where we can't mine that much.
Yeah.
Materials.
We can't do it now.
At least like ethically and sustainably, so I think definitely see the.
Well, just in this last week, I've heard that several of the car manufacturers are shutting down their battery powered car production because they can't get enough batteries.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think with
lithium mining is a big problem.
yeah,
Yep.
other countries now, I think I read somewhere, China has a new up and coming company that I think Tesla was over in China for early days, kind of had, you know, some partners there. They had opened a Tesla factory, new, and I think the Chinese government were like, we want this to happen, right? Because we're kind of behind the curve. So now with other countries kind of catching up with battery powered, I think it's even gonna get more competitive, because I think they have ownership of kind of like, they own a mine, is what I heard, this one Chinese company, so I think it's getting a bit harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Well, and I think it's a natural way to move forward. You know, we can't turn the switch, like I said. We're gonna have to have battery up. I have a hybrid car. I know all the good, the bad, and the ugly about it, but I understand too that is the best technology that I see right now, where I can combine both gasoline and battery. But as we go forward, we've got to get away from both of those technologies, and we got to come up with something that's sustainable. And hydrogen is the only player.
In your research, did you find any other countries kind of like that you think are they using hydrogen in like?
Yeah, Germany,
Okay.
France, and that's why we went to Germany on Alstom coaches that we want to get here. Yeah, and the friend of mine that moved up to Cheyenne, he helped put in hydrogen refueling stations in Germany 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And they've got a hydrogen refueling network, not this patchwork thing that the US Department of Energy is trying to put together.
Was it Japan or China just built a hydrogen train?
Yep. You know, and we talked to JR East is the name of the hydrogen company in Japan. I don't know too much about China. It's hard to find out any of the technical stuff about China, and whether we'll be able to do commerce with them or not in the future, Lord only knows. But Japan is another player in it for sure.
Are they getting their hydrogen from electrolysis?
Yeah.
Just
I say that, yes, very definitely. They are still getting some from natural gas. But Japan, you know, they're an island, so they've got to import almost everything.
right.
So,
Right. Just as a side note, you mentioned hybrid vehicles. Electric vehicles are obviously very popular, but I think there's a misperception in a lot of public that they think that electric vehicles are emission free. But what you're doing really is shifting it upstream.
yeah.
Because where is that electricity coming from?
Yeah.
It's coming from a coal-fired power plant. Right. That's where your emission is.
Well, and that's Excel Energy selling us all this black energy.
Right. So electric vehicles are not really pollution free.
It depends on the source. I own an EV. I understand what you're saying, but it depends if you're getting it from like.
Yeah, if the
Through
power
an
is-
Excel, yeah, I understand
the
that, but I'm
power-
saying if you get it from like,
Yeah.
where's the source is
Yeah,
what you're
the
asking.
power
the
industry
question.
is using mostly fossil fuels.
Still a problem.
So that's the transition that needs to happen.
Right.
In the power generation industry.
The electricity has to be imported to the train in which you're producing the hydrogen.
Well, you take the sun and you use solar panels, convert that sun into electrical energy. The electrical energy then goes through the electrolysis here and separates it out into oxygen and hydrogen. Take the hydrogen and you put it into our hydrogen pipeline, which becomes our battery. Hydrogen's there. Then when the train stops to load people or whatever, or at the end of the day, however many you want to do, you fill the tanks with hydrogen. Then when the train moves, it takes the hydrogen and runs that through a fuel cell, which again makes electricity to run the electric motors. So you still end up to the same thing. You're just trying to do it more efficiently than burning petroleum to make it happen.
Yeah, also hydrogen has been looked at as a transportation fuel in itself. But the main issue, or one of the main issues, was safety, because it's a hydrogen bomb. You have it on
Yeah.
on the train.
Well, and of course, the hydrogen bomb and hydrogen for a car are
Right.
worlds apart.
But
But
it's pressurized hydrogen.
yeah,
Flammable, yeah, but
It's
gasoline is
explosive.
flammable.
well, and you know, the most famous one is, of course, the Hindenburg. But it turns out that the hydrogen that was on board saved lives. What happened was the balloon was full of hydrogen, but they still used diesel engines to move the vehicle. Okay, so they had the fire started from a shock from the what is it, lightning, there we go. But the hydrogen, because it's so light and is buoyant, it all went this way and it carried a lot of the fire that was created with the diesel and the diesel engines. It carried the fire up with it and away from the people. 35 people, I think, survived that. And they even fell out of the gondola as far as that goes. So, I mean, they had multiple jeopardy there. But so, you know, you got to look at things in the whole context of it's happening, because you can imagine, I've been out in public and done lots of talking about hydrogen, and somebody in the back will go, yeah, but you heard about the hydrogen? And I was in radio and television. Of course, that was one of the big things in radio. Oh my God, the guy that did the broadcast for WGN became world famous because of that. Sure. But have you ever seen a car that's leaked gasoline inside a garage at a house? And gasoline is just going to keep building and building, and there's fumes coming up from it, but the gasoline itself will stay in that location. Once a spark hits it, the whole thing is going up. Hydrogen, I tried to build a hydrogen demonstration unit, kind of like my swimming pool. But I built it out of sheet metal, and what I set it up to do was, when the hydrogen exploded, that I had it hinged on the top. Kind of looked like an outhouse, really. That's what my friend called it. Anyway, the top was hinged so that when it blew up, that would release the power and it wouldn't go out like this. Right. I could never get enough hydrogen into my little enclosure there to make it blow up, because it was seeping through every little cranny and trying to go everywhere it could to combine with something else. So it is not easy to do it. And when I've gone out and done hydrogen safety training for first responders around the United States, this friend of mine from Cheyenne and I go around doing that. The biggest compliment I get is, well, you have told us that hydrogen in a hydrogen tank in a car will escape before we even get there, because it's true. If a hydrogen tank is pierced, it most likely is not going to explode, because it just wants to go. The friction will sometimes ignite it, but at the same time, that's just a torch going straight up in the air, not going into the car itself. Whereas gasoline will do that, and you see a whole car blow up.
We have a question from our Zoom audience.
Yeah.
It's concerning, we live in a dry climate in Colorado. Water is a topic of concern, water availability, and that sort of thing. Are there any special considerations with the amount of water required to produce the hydrogen, given our shortages here? And is that a consideration here?
Yes, it is. In several respects, we use more water to drill and to get gasoline to run in our cars than the hydrogen will ever require. That set aside, I have a family that live up in the Yuma area, and they raise a lot of corn up there and everything. And they are very concerned about irrigation in the future, because our aquifer here that we feed all the irrigation from, our aquifer is going this way. It's not going up, it's going this way. So with the technology that we're developing here, I don't want to stop just with transportation. We can run a pipeline. Well, let me back up a little bit. I grew up in South Dakota, and up at the corner of South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota is the Red River Valley. Every spring, guess what happens at the Red River Valley? It floods. And all that water from Canada and all the surrounding area all channels down that Red River Valley, and it floods the whole Mississippi Valley all the way down. So we take all that valuable water and shoot it out to Mississippi. In the meantime, we flood everything on the way. My proposal is to take that water and run it over to the mouth of the aquifer and start refilling the aquifer. And we do the same thing to that we're going to do with our train. We're going to have a canopy over the top of it to power all the pumps that you would need to move it along and to pay for the piping to go with it. And I started working with some of my relatives in South Dakota, and they hit upon the main thing right away, and that's the right of way. But we used to say in Montana, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And so when it finally gets to the point that we don't have any money or any water left in our aquifers, they'll start listening to some out of the box thinking like me, and I probably won't be here to lead that challenge.
So why don't you just buy a hydrogen engine and bring it over and test it on a freight train?
On the what?
On a freight train or something.
They do. That's some of the first thing that they've done in Los Angeles and Vancouver. They've got hydrogen freight trains that are basically the tractors on the yard to move things around. So yeah, that's been done.
Explain that hydrogen engine. Is it like combustion?
Yeah, you can use
hydrogen?
combustion. Yeah. In fact, when I was up in Montana, I got a grant and I converted 3 Chevy pickups to run on both hydrogen and gasoline.
Using a fuel cell?
Well, that used combustion.
I mean, why don't you get an engine running on a fuel cell and just prototype it?
That's basically what the locomotives do. We have a fuel cell but the fuel cell doesn't run on hydrogen. It simply converts hydrogen to electricity.
Right.
So we have a fuel cell in each one of the coaches. It's converting the hydrogen that's stored in the tank back into electricity, and electricity is running the electric motor. Electric motors are 90% efficient. Diesel engines and internal combustion engines are somewhere around 40 or 50% efficient.
But I don't see why you don't just do the project without building, like the solar corridor and so forth. Why don't you just get the hydrogen engine going?
Well, because you've got to get the hydrogen from someplace, because the hydrogen doesn't exist. Well, that's just changed in the last 5 years. There are some pockets of hydrogen that they found in Nebraska, and they think they found one here in Colorado.
Tiny.
But you've got to have the hydrogen, and it's got to be separated away from other elements in order to go through the fuel cell and make the electricity.
But I don't see why you don't just do the project, do a prototype.
That doesn't work. In fact, I had a guy I had lots of engineers I found that had left society. You know how these engineers are. And they moved up into the mountains of Montana, and they heard about some of the stuff I'm doing, and they would come down and they'd talk to me about this stuff. And I wouldn't discourage them. I mean, some of the things, like one guy says, well, I'm going to freeze hydrogen. And I said, well, that's good. I said, how do you think you're going to do that? He says, well, I got this old freezer and I'm going to freeze the hydrogen and then I can move it from one place there. I said, did you know that hydrogen has to be at a minus 425 degrees in order to freeze it? Oh, he says, that's terrible. But I didn't discourage those people, because I've had just as wild ideas. I mean, and the people still listen to me and put up with me.
So Paul, at STE, you have any engineers? You just mentioned.
Yeah, my partner is an engineer, Dave Rubel.
Oh, PE, yeah.
Yeah, and I, my background is in renewable energy, and I spent 45 years being a dean and that sort of thing at universities, and you know how they don't work. So, so that's the two things. So that's where we're at with our proof of concept. Then we can attract the engineers and get the people that we want to hire and get the money that we need to get the minds working on this and implementing these things. Because even though we think we've planned this pretty well, to think that there's no hiccups would be an illusion for sure.
Right. Oh, it's very promising.
Yeah, I look at this and I'm like, this is, to me, it's totally possible. My biggest question mark, like, I love the challenging of the traditional economic model.
Yeah.
I don't see how, like, when I look at like what it would take to build all this, it's like, that's like a massive capital cost. And I'm wondering, how do you acquire that capital and then escape the economic system that sort of allowed you to get that capital? Because you're going to get people, right, investors, if they're bought in, that are going to want to see a return on investment.
For sure.
And so is there a way to get the capital, build the thing, and then it's self-sustaining and kind of escape the economic system? Because that's the only path I could see that's possible. But
I think you're right.
I have like trouble where it's like, well, if you use the traditional economic system to get the thing that you want, how can you escape it? Like,
Well,
if you see what I'm
That's why
going.
you're sitting.
we gotta do better for sure. But it's a Legos project, and that's why we're starting with the proof of concept and a solar farm. So we can make, 4 or 5 million off of our initial solar farm. With $4 or $5 million, we can hire the engineers and the people that we need to start building it and putting it together and attracting investors and making a profit so that we can spin off some money for them as investors.
Sure.
So you're right. If you're going to start something new like this, whether it's a swimming pool in Deep Smith, South Dakota, you've got to start small. It's $7.75 to me at 10 years old. That's quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
You guys have your first PV plant coming in construction in 2025, you said?
Yeah,
How large is that?
it's going to be 160 acres.
How many megawatts?
I need my engineer here.
Is it on the like scale of like?
It's it'd be several megawatts. And the interesting thing is, I hear people bragging, Excel and a lot of, well, we just put in a 10 megawatt system. That isn't going to work. You have to have megawatts in order to generate enough electricity to do the things that we're talking about here, to electrolyze the water, to do the installations. And we're plowing the money back into the system as opposed to it being skimmed off the top by others. I won't clarify those,
But yeah, I think the path to commercialization is going to need the whole process flow diagram, economics around it, energy, material balance, and the return on investment.
Yeah.
That Vince is talking about. And the investors that, if they're going to make substantial investments, they're going to need to see this, all these details.
For sure. That's why we need the proof of concept.
Yeah, proof of concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just an idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's like because it's like you bring up sort of the traditional way we do things. And I think the one thing that is really irritating is that, us as the ratepayers pay for Excel to build, a power generation station. So then they get to earn the rate of return on investment on that.
Exactly.
It's like we all invested in that thing and they're the ones that get to make the money off of it. And that's like, I would love to break that model somehow.
United Power Company, which is in Wells County. They just sued.
Don't mind me.
Yeah, they just sued to get control of the power in their area. And I think that is coming to fruition and that they're putting this all together and they're going to be looking at breaking away from Excel. The other thing is, on the very front end of this, 6-8 years ago, I was working on a hydrogen powered monorail system that worked on magnetic levitation that I brought here from the university research that I was doing. And I'm sorry, I gotta quit watching what he's doing.
Sorry.
So I talked to the PUC on how we could do that, and they said, secret is you can have your own microgrid. So if we've got a line going from here to Fort Collins, for example, we can branch off from our microgrid everywhere along the line and do a contract with them to sell them electricity. We can sell and still make everything work at 10 cents a kilowatt. Me and my home, I'm paying closer to 20 cents. If you look at the long list of fees that Excel has on that second page, they're doing the same thing to you that the legislature is doing. They just add more taxes on the stuff or increase the fares by 50 cents. Or what my son does, I got him started in wastewater treatment systems. He now is CEO of a major wastewater treatment system throughout Arizona and Western United States. All he does is if they need to do something different, he adds 10 cents onto their bill every month. Well, 10 cents for 10 million people, that's a lot of money. And you can do a lot of things with that. That's what Excel's doing to us.
Right.
And we don't have any choice because they're a monopoly operation.
So, but how do you expect not to do that yourself? Excel is just in generation of electricity and distribution. And if you got generation, distribution, and a whole myriad of other services and whatnot, you're gonna have to come in with a higher price. It's not gonna be as easy as saying we're gonna be half the price of Excel and be able to.
So you think Excel is operating efficiently?
I mean, there's fat that can be trimmed, just like any company,
They're
but
profitable.
if you're, once you get to a point where you're in mass and you've got a lot of the features that you plan on implementing, there's gonna be a ton of, just operation costs alone.
So what's your plan for better energy and sustainable transportation for the future?
I'm not trying to stray away from the plan. I'm just curious that what a realistic cost for selling the energy could be with the functionality that is intended.
Well, so far the numbers pan out very well, but we don't have the brain power yet hired that we really need to do the in-depth, tighten the screws thing that you're talking about for sure.
Yeah, there needs to be a detailed analysis.
Yeah.
And then you would benefit from the economy of scale once you scale it up.
Well, yeah, if we've got, okay, so every 2 miles, we have a community opportunity station. At each station, we have 10 electrical EV charging stations, and we have 10 hydrogen refueling stations. And so we've got a system then, and we supply the system throughout it, and we only use our infrastructure to do it. And we've got our own right-of-way. The indication is, and the numbers that we've seen so far, looks like that is a very doable system. Not to have everybody's fingers and hands in the works.
I have a question from Zoom land. It's a little bit late in the conversation, but we were addressing lithium.
Yeah.
And the availability of lithium earlier on. This gentleman in Zoom land challenges the statement that there's not enough lithium around. He says it's incorrect. We have ample supplies of lithium in Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and California because lithium is the third lightest element in the universe. It occurs in salts in the top 1/10 of a mile on the Earth's surface. You don't have to mine very deeply to find it. And then he says below that, currently Australia is the world's leading producer of lithium, providing 55% of the global supply.
Well, and in fact, they just found, and what he's talking about is true because in Utah, they're starting to mine the Great Salt Lake and get the lithium, or they're doing some experimental things to get the lithium out of the salt that's there. So I'm hoping that there's more lithium out there because we're going to have to still have batteries to use in our systems, because they are the regulator with electricity coming from the fuel cell going to the motor. The battery becomes a regulator to stabilize the power. So, yeah, so I'm hoping that we have more lithium. The reports I've seen, and the reason that everybody's cutting back on production is that it's not as readily available as they would like it to be. Maybe it will be in the future, and that's going to help everything that we're talking about. And if we can benefit from that by having cheaper batteries and lighter batteries, that will only be good for us. But there is no one in the United States government that thinks that in the know that thinks electric cars are going to take over from internal combustion engines.
I guess a question I have, everything I know comes from a podcast, so what do I know, right? But it was somebody who was talking about, that was promoting hydrogen fuel cells as a technology, using solar to generate the necessary electricity to produce it and so on, and trying to come up with cost-effective ways of producing this, the hydrogen. And a problem this gentleman raised was, and I don't know if this is a solved problem or if it's a real problem or not, but storage was a problem for the hydrogen, because as this gentleman was describing in the podcast, hydrogen is a very, very small, I'll call it a molecule, it's like one of the small elements. So it's very leaky, and therefore you can't just stick it in a regular pipe. It needs special infrastructure. And I don't have a sense of what size of infrastructure we need to store and transmit. You're talking about transmitting it over a short distance, it sounds like.
350 miles.
And which is not going from here to wherever. It's, it's more manageable, but is that a special consideration? What does that do to the costs of having to produce the necessary tubes, or what all, tanks that are hydrogen leak proof?
Yeah.
So also, in addition to that, the fact that it has to be under tremendous pressure.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
It can be under any pressure. In fact, the more pressure you put on it, the more it's going to push those little small molecules into any crevices or anything in the pipe. And so you can't use a regular pipe. You have to use stainless steel. And now they've come out with liners that they can put into existing pipe structures. And the liners are so constructed that they will contain those small molecules.
But I'm talking about the container that you're going to use for 350 miles of travel.
Yeah, we have our pipeline is going to be
When you put it on board the train.
When you put it on board the train, you would fill the tank on the train. The tank would be about this big, about that long. And that would be, cars that are on, the cars are under high pressure. They're 10,000 PSI because they need smaller tanks. But those are pretty much explosion proof in what they put together. And I've seen some of the tests that have been done on those. And, they're very reliable and have been used. But you're right, those are 10,000 PSI.
Just for the benefit of the audience out in Zoom, you gestured how large the tank would be. Maybe explain it so that folks out there can see.
Oh, my gesture. Okay. Well, the one on the car is about this wide and about this big around. And that's at 10,000 PSI, and that's good for 300 miles.
You see about 3 feet
Duffel
to about
bag size, maybe.
What's that?
Like a duffel bag size.
Yeah, exactly. It's
And
and it's all wrapped in carbon fiber, and I've seen them dropped out of airplanes, and I've seen them try to puncture it with stuff, and they wouldn't
exist. There are cars that have that.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah, in fact,
experimental, right?
Yeah, I've driven.
They have one at NREL. They have a Toyota.
Yeah,
hydrogen fuel
Toyota
cell.
has, yeah. And I've driven several of them over the years. And the last one I drove was in California at a hydrogen conference. And Leo, he also wanted to drive one. And it just happened that we both pulled up to the stop sign at the same time. And I rolled down my window. I said, Leo, you want to run it? And he says, yeah. So when the light changed, we both took off and I beat him off the line.
It's 8:25. We need to start wrapping things up.
Yes.
Any final last questions? We have to be out of here by 8:30, so.
looks promising, but I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of detailed analysis and to be, you get your funding from DOE mostly, I suppose. No?
Don't have anything to do with DOE.
Oh,
They don't want anything to do with us.
oh, okay. So private capital.
Yep. So if, you know, if you got your checkbook with you, I'm open.
No, I have my business card.
Oh, okay, that's it. That'll work. That'll work. Well, I appreciate everybody and all your questions. I think that's great. And I don't mind questions or anything. I've probably heard them all over the years. But that makes us think more, you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, my engineer friend, that's my partner now, when we first started on this, he was 100%, we got to put batteries in these trains.
Mm.
And so I just said to him, you know, I said the same thing I said here. And as an engineer, he went home and he started doing his research. And he researched it and he come back to me and says, Paul, you're right. This is the only way to do it. So that's what I'm hoping that I encourage people to do is don't just take my word for it. Go home and find out where I'm right, where I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know as we develop this. I'm open, you know, I'm not stubborn.
Great. Think outside the box.
Yeah. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
This is the Denver chapter of the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, and we appreciate everyone's attendance. Look forward to seeing you guys next month.